but we're going to record the session for posterity. We'll see if it comes out okay. If the demos all blow up, I'll have to throw the recording away. My name is Burr Sutter. How many people saw the keynote presentation earlier? Keynote demonstration. Oh, excellent. All right, I'm going to show you a little bit more of that. We're going to dive into it a little bit, kind of talk about how we architected that, and then we're going to show you some other stuff related to HTML5. So my name is Burr Sutter. I'm the Senior Product Manager at JBoss for things that are developer-facing. That's my focus. If you've been to previous JBoss worlds, I was the SOA guy, or the BPM guy, or the BRMS, rules, JVPM, ESB guy. Well, I switched roles after last JBoss world into more the developer-facing frameworks, technologies, and tooling. So that is really my area right now, and this HTML5 thing kind of fell into my sweet spot. And if you guys are interested in more JBoss content going forward, I run a webinar series every month, jboss.org/webinars. And so we have to keep the web page updated. We also email the newsletter list. I encourage you to get on the newsletter list. There's over 100,000 emails or email addresses on that list already. Get on the email list, and then we'll tell you each month what is up and coming. For instance, in the month of May, I've seen 3 that we're going to talk about. I'm going to get Jay to come on board. Jay's going to talk about Rich Faces 4 in the future. We're going to probably do some Google Web Toolkit stuff in the future. We also have AS7 to talk about. We just did a bunch of sessions on Hibernate. We did sessions on CDI. We did a big session on clustering. So these webinars are fairly popular. We'll get multi-hundred people on the line, right? So we get a lot of people there to come talk with us about what's going on. And email addresses for me. All right, so let's get started. Advance the slide. Well, great. Why do you not want to move forward? There we go. Okay, so historically, if you're a JBoss user for a long period of time, this is what you would have seen from us, right? You know, if you guys have been working with JBoss a long time, and there's plenty of seats up front, so come on up front. There's several right here. I also said earlier, if you have to leave in the middle of it, that's fine too. You know, if you get tired of it. But you know, I just have a couple screenshots here from various consoles. Typically, what we want to show you here at JBoss looks something like that: the JMX console, that kind of thing. And what we did in the keynote session is we showed you something like this. All right, so we kind of changed the game a little bit on you guys. We've historically been a server-side, middleware-only kind of company. But we now have a group of people within the company that are very much focused on the presentation tier or view tier of your application. So I'm going to show you this demo one more time. We'll see if we get it all running. Okay, so for those of you who missed it, I want to show you what this is about. All right. So what we have here is a Google Web Toolkit application using a RAI to take server-side events and push them out to the browser in real time. So you're going to notice a common theme here. So using Google Web Toolkit, driving the browser in real time. Kind of think of that as like a real-time dashboard. We're going to find server-side data that's interesting and jam it out to the browser as fast as we can. And that team, Mike's over here, he's going to talk about this topic in the next session right after mine. Okay? This user interface here was built by Wesley and Jay. They're going to talk about this tomorrow. All right? So if you want a deeper dive into rich faces, specifically within the keynote presentation, and rich faces for mobile, they're going to talk about that more. And if you remember in the keynote demo, you had this cool orientation thing. We used CSS media queries, and there's some other neat tricks you can use to basically determine the size and shape of the device you're displaying to and display a different set of content, or a different layout, I should say. And so that's the tweet stream. That's the Rich Faces app. And this application here is a standard, it's an HTML5 app, period. All right? It's basically HTML5 canvas that we're drawing that little ball on, and it's it's JavaScript. That's it. That's all it. So I'm gonna focus most of my session more on that type of construct. So if you're more interested in the GWT, Google Web Toolkit side thing, that's gonna be Mike's session right after mine. If you're more interested in the rich faces kind of thing, that's gonna be Jay and Wes's session tomorrow afternoon. What time tomorrow? Like 2 o'clock?
11 to 12.
11 to 12? Okay. So they'll be on before lunch. So let's click the button and see what magic happens here. All right, let me make sure that's refreshed properly. Good. Get this set up so you can see it, and let's see how this goes. There we go. All right, so it's animating in. Each of those, if you notice the little balls popping into play there, each of those balls represents a certain number of keys in the InfiniSpan grid. I'm running a single node grid right now. So the InfiniSpan is our data store, our in-memory data store. And so as that little guy's animating in, each of those bigger balls on the far outside represent 100 new keys being added to the grid. You can see tweet stream here is, and please do not hold me responsible for anything that shows up here. I have no idea what people are tweeting right now. So we're ingesting the tweet stream, all right, the Twitterverse, if you will, jamming it into an InfiniSpan grid. All right, my little admin console you guys did not see in the keynote demo because that was the behind the scenes piece. That's what allowed the stream to open and stop. And then you can also see the tag cloud here, this grid application. What they're doing is these two apps are really kind of analyzing what's hot, right? And if you notice, whatever that word is in some language I don't know. Does anyone know? Is that Spanish? Yeah. So somebody's tagged that pretty frequently out there in the Twitterverse. You can see it's been hit 3 times. FB, I guess that's Facebook, 3 times. All right, NP, 3 times. And because they're the hottest topics, they show up in gold. And then if it's the next, whoop, somebody just pulled ahead there. Look at that. Team follow back is a very common one. So it just shot to the lead. All right, so if you guys remember our keynote demo, this is exactly what we were showing. We had people voting, sending in tweets, and based on who was winning, you kind of pop this up. So this concept, though, if you think about it, and this, of course, runs on mobile devices and all that. I was going to show you that, but I couldn't get the networking figured out for some reason. I couldn't get that figured out last night, so I gave up on that. But literally, right now, you guys could be on your phone or on your iPad getting this real-time feed from these applications. All right? So we didn't actually put that in the keynote demo, but we were going to, but we couldn't figure out the networking in that room either. But we were going to have you guys all break out your iPhone or iPad or whatever, and we're going to just send you all this data streaming to your phone right in the session. So it works. This was not a fake demonstration we showed you on Tuesday. You can see it all running here again. And let me hit stop the stream. And one thing that's kind of fun, let's see if this works well. We have we can dump the InfiniSpan, all the data that's in it. So right now, I don't know, we have several thousand tweets into the system at this point. Don't give me error messages. All right, InfiniSpan, and let's see if this will work. Clear. All right, notice it's fading away. So you wipe out the InfiniSpan in the background. The server side goes, wow, I no longer have any data. Let me let my browsers know, right? All 50 of them, 100 of them, 5,000 of them, we don't care, that the data is now gone, right? So that concept there is very important. And the reason I kick off with this is because, again, my goal here is not to educate you in a deep way about this topic, but again, to inspire you to go looking deeper after the session. And you can see what you can build. If you're into this HTML5 mobile web perspective, you can build some pretty cool stuff. All these things were built by people working part-time in the last 3 weeks. All right, so this didn't take a ton of engineering time. It just means, we had people who could focus on it only on their nights and weekends. All right, mostly. Right, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into the more formal presentation. I'll try not to belabor some of these points, and we'll move pretty quickly so we can get through it all. That font doesn't come out too well, but if you're a developer in the 70s, you had to learn COBOL, and you had to know COBOL, and you knew COBOL and maybe some JCL. That was it. That's all you had to know, and you got paid. In the 80s, right, you might have learned some C or C++. You might have done some 4GL or Cobra programming, relational databases in SQL and Unix maybe. But you had to learn more stuff, right? Your inventory of skills has grown when you moved into the 80s. In the 90s, you might have to learn some things like HTML or CGI. You remember that? Common Gateway Interface. Anyone did that? CGI bin, some Perl stuff maybe. Cookies. I remember having to go out and talk to people, really, 16 years ago. I used to give presentations around what the web was. And I had to explain that a cookie was not evil. It was not going to steal your credit card. I had that conversation a lot of times. But maybe you learned some Java, maybe servlet programming, EJB programming. You might have learned some, what it meant to run things on Windows or Solaris or AIX. And then, in the early 2000s, right, you learned struts and Spring and Hibernate, XML, web services. You learned things like JSF or maybe some AJAX kind of things if you did some JavaScript. You also got all about Agile, continuous integration, automated testing. So these are skills that you guys had to develop, So if we go back to the 70s, pretty easy. You had to kind of know one thing. already in the year 2005 or so, you had to know like 25 things. Well, it just keeps on getting worse. The good news is, as software people, we're always going to be in high demand because every year we got to learn a whole bunch of new tricks. And so now in the 2010s, right, in 2015, you got to know EU6, you got to know GWT, you got to know mobile web, you got to know this thing called HTML5, you got to know how to program for iOS, maybe with Objective-C, Java on Android, Ruby on Rails, right? It doesn't matter, it just keeps on going further and further and further. Now you're using Git, right, instead of just SVN, and you picked up SVN only because you got off CVS, and you got off on CVS only because you got off PVCS, that old one. I can't even say it anymore, it's been so long. Okay? But the good news is you're now superheroes. But just keep that in mind, all right? I put this to give you guys context and perspective. We're always learning in this business, and that's a good thing. That should be an exciting thing. I know it's tiring as well. It exhausts me often, but it's a cool thing to always be growing in your knowledge base, and this concept of HTML5 is just that next evolution, that next step. Okay? The UI layer is the most dynamic layer of any of the application layers that you guys interact with today. Server-side services of some sort, whether it be EJBs, web services, RESTful services, Spring Pojos, they kind of all work about the same. And you know, the whole concept of transactions and messaging and injection, at this point, it's just a couple annotations. It has no learning curve any longer. So I used to have these conversations with people that would say, I'm a back-end developer. You know, it sounds a funny phrase to think about it, you know what I mean? But I'm a back-end guy. Okay, I don't do that front-end stuff. Well, if you're a back-end person now, really, it's an annotation or two or four. That's it. So it can't be that hard any longer. So the UI layer is where it's at these days. This is what's interesting now, and it's the most challenging area to program in because of cross-browser requirements. And so we'll hopefully talk about some of those cross-browser requirements. But you can see out here we have Google Web Toolkit, we have Flex, we have jQuery, struts. For a lot of people use struts, ice faces, rich faces, prime faces, lots of faces, right? We have all sorts of faces. And then you could have the Play framework, or Tapestry. There's just a new framework every day showing up in this space. And it's a lot of fun. I didn't put all the Ajax frameworks out there. And there are some seats over here in the front, by the way, and over here if you want to come to the front. You can still run out later if you decide you need to. So again, more context here. If you look at the year 2002, you probably knew HTML. You probably did some struts programming. You might have used EJB2, or in most cases, I suspect you just dumped all your business logic in your struts action, right? You might have used stored procedures, right? We've all done some transact SQL or PLSQL programming in our times. In 2006, you might have added some Ajax to that, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Probably still use some struts. But in 2010, we see a lot more people going to JSF and rich faces kind of programming models. There's several people here that use JSF. We saw that earlier. Spring MVC has also done fairly well the last couple of years. I have a little demo of Spring MVC, but a lot of people find that to be very popular. GWT, Google Web Toolkit, has done very well of late. All right, and a lot of people are using Spring or Seam in that middle tier, and then on a Hibernate JPA layer. And then if you look into 2011 and beyond, we're seeing JSF2 and Rich Faces 4, very, very popular, growing in prominence right now. Spring MVC continues to do well. Google Web Toolkit continues to hold steady and grow and gain market share. EJB 3.1, basically Pojo programming within Java EE and context dependency injection, right? CDI is growing in popularity, and you're going to hear a lot more and more about it. But if you continue going to the future, I actually have one thing that's kind of unique on there, and it's this concept of a Restful UI engine. Okay? So the model has changed a little bit, and there's different ways to build applications, and I call it this Restful UI engine because it's the back end of a really cool jQuery-based application is the way to think of it. In other words, you're going to write your front end in JavaScript, and you're going to write your back end in Java, and you're going to be very, very happy with that concept, assuming you're okay with the learning curve. And that's really the challenge, and so we'll try to give you guys a little bit more context there. So this diagram here talks about the JBoss focus for UI. This is my personal way to capture it and think about it, but to some degree, because of the area I work in, this is the JBoss perspective on it. And so Spring MVC and Rest Easy make wonderful back ends to like a JavaScript front end. All right, and then that's kind of the area I focus on in this talk. but there's also still JSF and rich faces, and also GWT as other options. And there's also Adobe Flex that's still fairly popular, but we don't personally, or we, the company, do not invest in that. We don't focus on that. Adobe invests in that and focuses on that. So let me kind of illustrate what might be interesting to you there. All right? If you are, let's say, a swing programmer, right? You really want to write Java-based clients, but some manager someplace said you had to write a web-based app instead. Okay, you guys, you know who I'm talking about, right? You really want to only write Java code, but someone forced you to write a web-based app. You prefer to actually ship Java classes down to the client if you could. You'd rather write an applet, or you'd rather write a fat client app in the old VB Power Builder kind of model. That swing developer. If you're that kind of mindset, and that's where your skills come from, or that's where your team's skills come from, GWT is a good option for you. All right, Google Web Toolkit kind of gives you that model all over again. You write nothing but Java code, and you actually write it like you're writing a fat client app. You truly just break it out like it's client server, and it generates all the client for you by, it actually compiles your Java code into JavaScript code. All right, and it really does feel like you're doing Power Builder kind of development again, or Visual Basic development again, or even Java Swing development again, client server architecture. So that's how I think of it. For people who really love that model, GWT is a wonderful solution for them, and GWT is doing very well in the market. If you follow the Java EE standards, and you're very much into the traditional web development model, you still write server-side Java, all right, but you kind of marry that with lots of XML for a templating mechanism, and then what happens is, you know, the app server takes that XML and the Java, marries them together, and produces HTML for you. You don't even have to know that much HTML. You just kind of lay everything out, and then you basically say, hey, render that page for me, and it does it for you automatically. All right, so JSF is fairly popular. Struts and JSF and Tapestry, there's all sorts of, you know, web work, what's now Struts 2, that fit in that space. So again, very popular. Adobe Flex, again, if you're kind of that client-server mindset and you want to build an ultra-rich, high-media client, Adobe Flex is going to be incredibly valuable for you. Right? It's going to be a Flash-based, plugin-based architecture, and you can actually then build, let's say, a true real-time dashboard with like spinning graphs and video clips flying in there. And you guys have seen various Flex applications and demos over the years, but you either chose to use it or you chose not to use it based on your overall architecture. So what I'm kind of promoting today is this concept of building what I call a natural HTML application. You actually write HTML, you write CSS, you write JavaScript, just as a regular old web person would, right? And you interact with server-side services that are hosted on, let's say, a JBoss application server. So no matter how you want to build your application, though, you still have access to all our backend services. You want to access the database through JPA layer, Java Persistence Architecture, JTA transactions, messaging, background jobs, caching, clustering, etc., etc. You have access to all those things. And that reminds me, while we're talking here, I'm going to shut down this server and bring up another one for our next set of demos. And I thought I'd think about it. All right. Takes a second to come down, so we'll let that thing tear down, and we'll come back to it in a second. All right, so again, we've had a Rich Faces session earlier today. Jay and Wes are going to be doing this Rich Faces session tomorrow. If you're interested in GWT, Mike will be doing that right after my session. I'm really more focused on this concept of an HTML5 client talking restfully to a backend server. That's really my focus. The interaction is going to be over something called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Some people still use XML. Some people use other ways to move the payload back and forth between the client and server. JSON is so easy these days, you might as well just go with that. Okay? As your backend architecture goes, Spring MVC is a wonderful solution for it. REST Easy is the technology that we build and we promote here at JBoss. So I'm going to show you an example of that. You can also use Ruby on Rails. Here's one big win with this model development, this architecture. Is if you decide you want to leave Java behind because you want to move to PHP for some reason, and I know a shop in Atlanta that has gone through this process, the entire front end can be lifted off and pointed at a new set of PHP services with not even a line of code change in the client side. All right? It's a beautiful thing if you have that need. If you want to move to C# from a .NET standpoint, or you just want to move from WebLogic to WebSphere to JBoss, right? Portability of the front end is guaranteed if you work with this architecture. Now, again, I mentioned that you can't see too much of this. It's going to be high density, but jQuery plus REST-easy is incredibly simple. So if you want your front-end client to interact with your server-side services, it is incredibly simple these days. It doesn't require much more than a couple annotations on your server-side Pojo, and jQuery has this really nice, do I have it listed in here? Yep. It has a getJSON method. You give it the URL of the endpoint, and it basically reaches out there and says, oh, you're giving me Java objects? Cool, I can deal with that. Suck them all in, build JavaScript objects for you automatically. You don't do any real work here. It's actually it's gotten so easy over the last several months that I'm shocked at it, because it was a lot harder a year ago. It really was. It just continues to improve all the time. So let me make sure. Let's see here. All right, that guy's down now.
You shouldn't say that if there's bosses in the room.
Bosses in the room?
You don't have to work.
All right. So let that new one start there. And okay. So I have a couple demonstrations around using Spring MVC or REST Easy. I'll show you in a second. But with Spring MVC, you have this concept of a declarative controller, and then the same kind of concept there. It produces JSON for you automatically, and the declarative controllers can be immediately accessed from a JSON client. And I'm just using a JavaScript client, a jQuery client using JSON. I like jQuery, but some of you guys might like EXTJS. Some of you guys might have heard of the new one called Sprout Core, and you're digging that right now. They're all good. There's a million of them out there. But probably the most prominent at the moment is jQuery. So the nice thing about that is, that means you can find a lot of books on the subject. If you just go to Google and say, jQuery, how to delete a list item, you'll find the answer. I'm serious. I mean, all the demos that I've created, I went to Google and said, well, here's the question I have. And it came back and said the first top 3 things were all the right answer. Almost every time. So the nice thing about jQuery is because the PHP crowd, the Ruby crowd, the Java crowd, the .NET crowd all use it, right? You can find every answer to every question you might have. I'm really shocked by that. Okay, and then I have a little Spring MVC application. So let's see here if we can demo some of these things. Yeah, is that server up yet? That server's not up yet, so I'll show you a different piece to this. Okay. So this is a simple little application I created, and I did this back in December when I was talking about Google App Engine. So that was a little different context, but I built this app using Spring MVC, using jQuery. So it's a jQuery-based application. All right. This is jQuery, right? So I have a rich text editor, HTML editor built right into my browser. I can hit update here or hit send. Oh. Yep, and that's actually going off to Google App Engine, so the server doesn't have to be up. Okay, and you can see it's updating the left-hand side of the screen for me. I think we've got the first one in there. Is the next one going in? All right, let's see this. Let's go here. Okay. There we go. So it's a simple little chat-like application, and in this case I have Firefox and Chrome both running, and then as a user types something in over here, you see it over there, and that kind of deal. And I randomized the emoticons there to give a unique ID to the person. But it's a simple little application, but it does kind of show the richness of what you can do with simple things you can find through jQuery and Google. I wanted a rich text editor, jQuery, rich text editor. Hit search. Ah, there's 3 of them. I think this one works pretty well. You download it, throw it in your project, you're ready to run. Let me show you a little bit about the code behind that. Actually, do I have that one here? Yeah, I do. So source. Just show you the Eclipse project. And where did I leave all that JavaScript at? Oh, here it is. All right. So it's called CL editor. Here you can see CL editor here. All right. And again, I told you it's going to be hard to read some of this stuff, but you can kind of see I have my JavaScript references here. So I got jQuery 1.4 in this application. I have a JSON utility, which you don't need anymore with jQuery 1.5. There's a timer utility as well to do the polling mechanism for me, and the little editor there. And the cool thing about a lot of these jQuery plugins, so it's a plugin-based architecture. Let's see if I can open this up a little bit more. You would actually let's see here. So you see a post JSON, that kind of thing. There's my fetch the data, but where's the text editor? Just want to show you what that looks like real fast. Okay, there's the field set text area. See that? It's a regular everyday text area. Just like it would be a regular everyday div or regular everyday UL or whatever it might be, text field, etc. And the fact that I have that JavaScript loaded in there basically says, oh, you got text areas for me. I'm going to turn them from regular text areas into rich text editors for you for free. You know, all you got to do is copy and paste the code in and you're ready to go. Download the JavaScript. So I particularly like that model of development. One thing I'll show you, and this again is a Spring MVC application. If you want here, okay? So if you just look at what, these are regular everyday Spring controllers. There's nothing unique or funny about them. They're simple annotated methods. All right, and the fact that you actually have a JSON library built into the Spring MVC application called Jackson, all you got to do is drag and drop it into your project or use Maven to pull it in. You get the JSON serialization for free. Your server-side Java objects become JavaScript objects to your client. And there's the client and the server don't even have to think about it any longer. Okay? And actually this is fairly hard to set up from a Spring MVC standpoint. If you look at our Rest Easy example, I'll show you that one. Here's what it looks like in Rest Easy. I basically have a list of strings here, and I'm going to say get list. I have an annotation that says produces text JSON. All right, it has a path, and has a, you annotate it with the method you want to use, get or post or whatever you're going to use there. So get in this case, and then I can build my array list and shoot it out to the browser. So I'm building standard everyday server-side objects, array list. I have a set. I actually tried several of these things. I have a set. I have a customer object, right? A customer pojo. I have a list of customer pojos. I'm building all that on the server side, and you can see there's nothing weird here. And again, this is the back-end developer. This is what they have to do. So they're going to build a pojo. They're going to build it the way they always have done it. They're going to put 3 little annotations on it, and now they're instantaneously producing content useful for the jQuery developer, EXTJS developer, the HTML5 style developer. All right. So let me see. I have that demo running here. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see if this works for me. Hello world. Okay, good. Let me turn on Firebug. All right. So because I have a bunch of things that are happening in the console, and you can see it basically goes out, hits the server, returns set item 1, 2, 3, 4, hit OK, and then it actually rips through the collection. So the neat thing is it's actually iterating through the collection in the JavaScript just as if it was server-side Java, or client-side Java, I should say. Let me see here. I'll pop open what that source code looks like, and you can guys get a quick view of what it looks like here. Let's see. So there's the collection dot there, and oh, it's in here. I've done a lot of experimentation. I was going to show you this thing running on the iPhone and iPad and all that. It all works on Android, iPhone, but I didn't get that all networking-wise. But you can see right here, right? $.getJSON. Give it the server-side URL that you want to interact with. In this case, it just simply pops it up, throws it up to the browser. But what's neat is function results. The results dot hello. I'm referring to the hello key and that that value that came back. If I go down here a little bit further, something more complicated. Okay, here I'm doing returned customer.firstname, returned customer.lastname, state, and status. I'm referring to those server-side Java objects just as if they're JavaScript objects, because they are now. And jQuery makes that magic happen for me. I now have customer objects in my browser, and I can put them up into anything I want to use it for. Okay? Again, very straightforward. You can see here I do an iteration. I do an each of the returned customers. I then peel off a customer and display out its first name, last name, that kind of thing. All right, and this is my version of how to build a really good-looking interface. Okay. The neat thing about jQuery, and one of the primary reasons you care about this whole space in general, is that you want to start providing mobile web experiences. Right? You can do really cool stuff in the browser, desktop browser, but you want to actually provide for an iPhone user or an Android user who want to interact with your application as well. And here's that same application. Okay, the same application. Oh, sorry, that's not the same version. Where's that? Oh, I got to get the URL right. That's a different one. different demo. And all I did was basically put it in a different URL so it's obvious. All right. So here's the same application with jQuery mobile styling. I didn't have to do any work. I basically said, hey, jQuery mobile, add to my app. Now I have what looks like an iPhone application. All right. It actually can look like a native iPhone application from the user standpoint. So just bear that in mind. So this space is incredibly rich, and it's growing tremendously right now. If you look at what Sencha is doing with their Sencha mobile widgets and toolset, they're amazing. And this jQuery mobile one is still fairly immature, but it is coming along quick. All right, and Sprout Core team is so there's really 3 major teams competing right now. Is how I look at it. jQuery is more of a collective community. Sprout Core is a real company. Sprout Core is a company, if you will, or there's a company behind that, I should say, and then there's Sencha. It was originally Apple, but there's yet another team now working on Sprout Core. Yehuda Katz, specifically, is a fellow I met in that space. Okay? So we'll keep marching along here before we run out of time. So, what is HTML5? HTML5, the going joke when you come to an HTML5 presentation is, I bet you didn't know there was an HTML4. And you probably didn't. And in many cases, a lot of people just kind of built what they needed to build to solve the problem they had to solve. You used whatever, you went out to Google and you found a website you liked, you hit view source, you thought that was a clever thing, and you stole that by copying and pasting and putting it in your code, right? If you did HTML-based development. Or if you did JSF development, you waited for JSF to provide that UI for you in many cases. But if you did regular HTML development, that's how you did it. So what happened was a group of people got together, and it's called the WHAT working group, and they went out there and analyzed thousands and thousands and thousands of websites to figure out what people really were doing. What were people doing and hacking around, making what Firefox versus IE versus Safari versus Chrome. They took all those ideas and they're producing a standard from that. All right, so this is still happening right now. But the thing to keep in mind is HTML5 is nothing more than HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. The next iteration of all of those things. Okay? So why is it all the hype now? The Chrome browser has happened. I say that has happened. A lot of you guys may not run Chrome. I obviously run Chrome and Firefox here locally. But my son came to me and he only runs Chrome. I never said anything to him. He determined that on his own at age 11. He decided Chrome was the coolest browser out there. All right, so there's some stats. I have a ton of stats in here, but Chrome enjoys as much market share now as Firefox, and it's now a 3-way horse race. It's IE, Firefox, and Chrome, when it used to be only IE in the industry. Right? IE was what, 80, 90%? It's down into the 30s and 40s because Firefox and Chrome have taken so much out of it. The WHAT working group, as I mentioned, basically looked at reality and made standards out of that reality. All right, iPhone happened. All right, and they didn't like Adobe Flash. That was another major motivation for this. Smartphones now will outship desktops in the year 2011. That's another reason why this is happening. All right, tens of millions of tablets have been sold. I'm not sure how many people have a tablet already, whether it be a Motorola Zoom or a Samsung Galaxy, or if it's you're running iPad 1 or iPad 2. Tens of millions are going out the door as fast as they can make them. There's a worldwide shortage of parts on tablet computers right now. And we're ready for it. We're tired of doing plain old web stuff, right? So it's gotten interesting. So a couple quick notes around HTML5 for what I call for designers. All right, the session title was, HTML5 for Java programmers. If you're a designer, though, there's some awesome stuff in here for you. It's not as important to the programmer per se, because normally you guys don't worry about this sort of thing. But there's this new semantic tags for doing things like article, aside, header, footer. These are things you always did with your divs, right? Div ID equal header, div ID equal footer. If you're really old school, you did it with a table, right? You remember in the old school we used to lay out the whole page in a big table with TRs and TDs. Out of habit, I still do that. Don't tell anybody. All right? I can't remember to use the divs in a CSS. But they have some nice things for making colors. You can make things, you can actually set the opacity level now of something so it fades into its background. You can kind of make up your own fonts. You want to turn it around upside down and make it go vertical, you can do that now. The big win, of course, is rounded corners, right? Border radius. You now have rounded corners out of the box, all right? Transforms and transitions. You guys, that's what you see in a PowerPoint slideshow, right? Basically, it fades in, fades out, and also works that way on iPhone a lot. Well, you get all that now in HTML5. So if you want to make that iPhone transition stuff happen on an Android device, you could. Canvas 2D and Canvas 3D. That application with the balls on it that you saw, that's a Canvas 2D application. And of course, video and audio. You don't need any stinking Flash anymore. That's the idea. All right, so header, footer, nav. Again, you always did this. And the What Working Group said, well, everybody's doing it. Let's just make those real tags. Okay? And now the neat thing about that is that actually helps you as a programmer know exactly how you should lay out your page better. And more importantly, for those folks who actually use the, what do they call them? The assisted browsers. Basically, the browsers that read the page to the people who don't, you know, the blind and whatnot. What was the word for that? Is it?
JAWS.
JAWS? You know, it now knows semantically what the page means better, right? It knows how to help the person who needs that assistance deal with that page. It also helps search engines. HTML5 Canvas, you guys saw what we did with our little animation, but check it out, man. I can play Space Invaders on the web. That's a real app I took a screenshot of after I played it for a little bit. You guys probably saw the Pac-Man that Google did that time, right? You actually could click right into it and play Pac-Man on their website. There's also this really cool one for Quake, and it is truly, the Google team did that one too. It's truly a multimedia, multiplayer version of Quake that runs only in the browser. It's insane. All JavaScript, all HTML5. Okay? I actually, one of the things I was thinking of doing with the keynote demo, and I didn't get a chance, I didn't have enough time, was I was going to actually have you draw on your phone and send in your drawings. And so I actually found an application that gave you that. That's a Canvas-based application that it runs on an iPad. You can draw with your finger. It's all browser-based, and then submit the drawing up to this web server. That's insanely cool if you think about it. And of course, you see our little animation we did there. And that was done, by the way, by a fellow named Andrew. I didn't write any code specifically for the demo. I was just kind of the guy orchestrating it all. And so Andrew busted out some amazing JavaScript to give us that animation. I didn't actually show you, but it has gravitational effects. It'll expand and contract as you add nodes. They pop in. It reforms the grid perfectly. If you drop a node out, right, it collapses the space. It's pretty amazing what he did there. HTML5 video player. Actually, I had this guy running earlier. Let's see if he'll come up for me. Wait. I always forget. I run all these browsers. I can't remember where I leave everything. You know, pretty neat stuff there. Run a little. Watch a little.
Has ever known.
Right? That's not done with Flash. That's done with HTML5. And then, you know, and you can have fun with it. Take a screen. So let's see. Right? So the neat thing about it, an audio clip or a video clip now, is you can interact with it through programming. So,
go ahead, Panda. Show us what you can do. Are they going to launch, or should I just wait until I get back to work or something?
So, you know, you can have a lot of fun with these. There's a million examples of these online where you can actually just go out there and have a lot of great fun with it and then interact with it. So if you think about that, there's a lot of use cases even in your own business for that sort of thing where you need to do some sort of online training application, let's say on an intranet. You can produce the video directly out to the browsers of your customers in their little, so your sales team, right, they're running around with their iPads. They can watch the training video. They can interact with the training video. They can take screenshots and captures of the training video. They can bookmark sections of the video and Facebook it to their wife and let the wife watch it at home. You know, the amount of things you can do these days is insane. All right, and I didn't get this one running, but this one right here is very cool. He actually has 2 iPhones to create a border inside a video, and then you can directly inject into his video, and through programming. And the idea there is, if you think of marketing things, right, you can actually have video playing in the background on someone's web page as they're looking at it. You can actually wake up the camera on their device. You have to get permission, and you take a picture of them, and you can show them in the clothing or something like that, right? Show them on the beach. So the marketing implications are crazy. I mentioned rounded corners there, right? And that's actually HTML5 Rocks. If you go to html5rocks.com, there's all these really cool demonstrations of that capability. So, but I call that for designers. So what about programmers? So these are the areas that we at JBoss have to think about harder and focus on, because we focus on programmers. And so we've had lots of debates about this internally, and we are working in these spaces. You know, we haven't fully delivered everything yet, but you saw the demonstration at the beginning of this session, as well as the one we did with Keynote. we definitely put some thought here. So the concept of web storage, web workers, and web sockets, the idea behind that is the browser is a real-time client interactive with the server. A web socket basically means open a socket between the client and server, interact directly between the two in real time. The example you always see with that use case is a chat client. You know, people chatting, and you can have some sort of, you know, bulletin board-like environment if you want. But I'll show you an example of that later. Web workers is multi-threaded behavior. So if you're a Java person, you're familiar with how to start a thread and how to, you know, what you can do with a background thread, that kind of thing. A web worker gives you that in the JavaScript world. And web storage means you can actually take any data you receive from the server or data that you've created or calculated and write it locally to the local device, the smartphone, the tablet, the desktop. And so that starts getting into offline support. One of the big things that people are going crazy about in the HTML5 world is you can take your application off the net. Just like if it was a Visual Basic application or a Swing-based application or a Power Builder-based application. You can take it off the net and you truly have local blob storage for like images or just, you know, serialized objects, or you can have SQL database storage. Right? It's not a full database, but it works kind of like a regular database with select statements and whatnot. Okay? Server-side events. There's one of the pieces of the spec is this concept of an SSE, a server-side event or a server-pushed event. I'm not too thrilled with that one yet, but it is pretty interesting. You know, if your primary use case is push, server to client push, which you saw in our demonstration, a server-side event might be another solution for you there. Okay? There's several new form fields. If you've been doing web programming for a long time, right, you put in a form tag, you put in text areas, input type equal text, and everybody's done input type equal text a million times, right? Well, now you can do input type equal email, or date, or range, or number, or color. And in the device or the desktop will provide the appropriate editor for that type. All right? So in other words, if it's color, it'll give you a color picker. If it's a date, it'll pop up a calendar. If it's a email, it'll make sure you put an @ sign in there and a period someplace. And that's pretty neat. There's some new meters and progress bars. So, you know, the concept of, whoa, we're working in the background, we'll keep on working. You get that for free now. The application cache will be used for offline storage. Your whole app can be cached locally on the client so that your user never has to download it again, as long as they don't clear the cache. And the cool thing about it is you, the programmer, simply flip a couple bits on the server side to say, hey, this is version 1.1 now. And it gets cached on the client. And then you can say, oh, it's version 1.2 now. It gets cached on the client. And that's true of your phones and your iPads and your desktops. Very much like what you would do if you're building Visual Basic, Power Builder, or Java Web Start applications. Java Web Start brought that to the game. Okay? Notifications, I put that in here because I've been thinking about how to demo that, and I had one, but I'm not going to show it today. But the idea that something happens on the server, and you know the notification bar down here in Windows, right? It pops up and says, hey, you have an update available. You can do that now. It actually shows up down here in the lower right-hand side, just like any other notification. That's kind of neat. Geolocation, that's the obvious one that people have seen a lot of. You know, we know exactly where you are. And device orientation. So I don't have that demo working right now, but you can actually, as the user tilts the device, you can get events for that. And you can decide, like one of the neat demos that's out there right now, is you see the person, you pick up your phone, and you watch something happen on the desktop, and you can steer the mouse and stuff by just moving the phone around. So these are the areas around HTML5 that I feel are important to the average programmer, some more so than others. The one I'm most curious about are the form fields and the sockets, quite honestly. From a JBoss standpoint, we got to think about how we interact with those kind of capabilities. So the common question is, we're going to run out of time, aren't we? And I have some more things to show you. The common question is, and I'll go through this very fast, what really works today? All right? So here, if you walk away with any one tip from this session, other than, hey, that was really cool, that guy was really excited, and he talks really fast, right? Go to this thing called Modernizer, all right? Modernizer, and I have a different spelling of it later where you can see it better. It actually is missing a letter in there. There's no E between the Z and the R. But Modernizer is a phenomenal JavaScript library that will help you tremendously. So Modernizer is the tool you bring into all your web apps from this point forward, all right? Let me just put it out there. You guys okay with that? the reason I say that is it helps you not just sniff the browser type, like, oh, is this Firefox version 4 or Firefox version 3.6 versus IE6? It doesn't care about that. It actually looks for specific capability in that browser and allows you to upgrade or degrade accordingly. So in other words, I'm running on this crazy old Palm version or something like that, and I'm a browser within that context. It'll actually say, you know what, here's the 5 things that do work. And so you can run Modernizer, and I took a bunch of screenshots. So you can actually see there's little checkboxes here of what HTML5 features are supported. Is drag and drop supported? I didn't mention that, but you can now drag in and out of the browser. If you guys run Gmail, that's a feature in Gmail now, if you guys tried that. So just like if you're using Outlook, right? Take this Word document, drag it into my Gmail, and it emails it. So drag and drop support, WebSocket support, touch events. Because I want to be able to run this on an iPad, does it support the dragging and dropping around of a finger kind of concept? I know it's all too small to read. Here's iOS 4.3. I took this from I grabbed my son's iPod, took a screenshot. I have my iPad, took a screenshot. But you just go test all these devices that you're interested in supporting. Modernizer will tell you what works. And if you include Modernizer in your code, you can say, if it does this, we'll do this cool thing. If it doesn't, we'll drop back into this other thing. Okay? So I really like Modernizer. Here's some Android versions. One thing to note, Android is actually a lot less capable than iOS. I know that hurts some people's feelings. All right, I'm an Android guy. This is my phone over there on the left-hand side, and actually another guy's phone. I asked someone else to take a screenshot off his phone. It is less capable. Just bear that in mind. The things that are missing are WebSockets, which I think are particularly important. The reason WebSockets are missing is because, well, they're not very secure. We're kind of scared of them. Okay, whatever. And they're also not completely spec'd yet. So iOS implements them, but the spec is yet to be finalized, so we know they're going to change. So that's kind of the reason why the Android community hasn't really bought into it. You know, there's a little fear there, and there's also some concern about when will the spec be finalized. Firefox has come out and said, oh, we're scared, we can't do it. And I'm being kind of facetious here, but they've put out warnings. You can actually turn WebSockets back on in Opera and Firefox if you want to, which I've done. Okay? So this one actually does a side-by-side comparison. iOS on the left-hand side there, and then I put in red the things that are missing from an Android standpoint. So you can see SVG is missing, WebSockets are missing, WebGL is missing, and CSS 3D transitions or transforms are missing. You may not need those things, but I personally do like the WebSockets feature. Okay? Another site is called HTML5test.com. Gives you a score. You can have all your end users go here, right? And have them email you what the results are, and then you can say, now I know why your browser is broken. That actually came up in a couple sessions already this week. People are like, oh, you know, my user called, you know, they called and complained it didn't run. Well, if you knew about this tool, you could say, hey, user, go here first. And the reason I know about this tool is I had someone else do it to me. I was complaining that his stuff was broken. He said, well, go run this real quick, and, you know, print this out and tell me what it says. Turns out I had a bogus something browser set up, so I fixed it and got a better score. Form fields, you can see this is off my iPhone device here, right? And you can kind of see specifically what really is broken or what really works. Application cache support, you can see the looks like the Droid and the iOS device tie on that category, right? Droid in this case scores much less than iOS does. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I've got tons of these, so I've done a lot of research. This is WebGL support. It only works on Chrome, right? So you can see Chrome is doing his job there. I put up the error messages on every other device I could find. My Android devices, my iPad devices. Okay? You can kind of see some other scores there. All right? There's a lot of data out there for JavaScript performance and HTML5 capability and JavaScript capability. You can kind of see, what's funny is this is a recent benchmark that someone produced, and IE9 blew away Chrome in JavaScript performance in this particular benchmark. So Microsoft has woken up. They're going to get back in this game. IE9 is not half bad. And they promised that IE10 will actually get back in the game, because they've lost 50% of their market share in a year. So they recognize that they're going to have to get back in this, otherwise Google is going to run away with it. So it's gotten very interesting. And so I mentioned the browser statistics. You can't really see that, but if you know, everybody has their own statistics. You know, you guys have heard the story, right? Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Every site kind of tracks these things, but you can see here, IE 8, 25%, Firefox 3.6, 23%, Chrome 10, 11%. Or up here in March of 2011, IE was 25% overall. That's all IE, right? Firefox 42, Chrome 25. So depending on who you're looking at, Chrome just keeps on coming. Okay, thank you. So let's, that's an example of jQuery mobile, right? I showed you what it looked like for my little application, but there's all these great controls and widgets you can have there. I took those screenshots off my Android phone. I want to show you some WebSocket stuff. All right, let's show you some WebSocket capability because there's some interesting aspects of that. I got to figure out what screens I'm supposed to be in here. Got all this crazy stuff. Dun, dun, dun. Not that one. I've got way too many windows open. All right, there. Let's see here. Let's refresh that page. And not that one. Here. The idea behind WebSockets, this is actually based on HornetQ. Oh, let me refresh properly. I killed the server earlier. There we go. So this is HornetQ, right? You guys are familiar with JMS. This is basically a JMS topic on the server side that you normally would interact with through some sort of Java capability. In this case, I'm talking to it directly through the browser. The JMS topic is sitting there, and I can send it messages. Right? Hit send, and on this other browser, and I did this purposely, one's Firefox and one's Chrome, so there's no magic here, like sharing of sessions or just regular JavaScript talking to the two different windows. This is truly going to the JBoss app server with the new message, putting it into the topic, and JMS, HornetQ, is saying send it out to all my other customers, in this case a listener over here in Chrome. So this concept of WebSockets is incredibly powerful, and it was one of the ideas that we had when we did that demonstration. We wanted to show a lot of push capability. So Rich Faces 4 has a push component built in, and there's also, if you look at what Mike will talk about in a little bit, we have the concept of actually taking server-side CDI capabilities, right? Like here, this @observes. You basically can annotate a server-side object and push directly out to a GWT client, also a Google Web Toolkit client. So these are areas we're exploring right now. We really want your feedback. We have the ability to basically say, if you make a change in InfiniSpan grid, send it out to the client. Add a message to a queue on HornetQ, send it to the client. Changes, any kind of change you see here in annotated CDI object, send it to a GWT client. Or if you're in a Rich Faces mode, we have the push component sent to the client. So you just have to kind of decide which technologies you're interested in investing in. But that's a lot of what we're focusing on right now, because that is very applicable to, let's say, a Java crowd like the JBoss crowd, and to what you guys want to do inside a browser. So I really like the WebSocket capability. It's one of my favorite things. We don't need to worry about that slide. And no, actually, I have one more I want to show you. One more demo I'll show you, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Okay, let me see if I can remember how to set this one up. You guys saw that tag cloud and stuff that we did earlier, right? No. You know, this is obviously I didn't rehearse or practice or anything, right? Yeah, this is it. Okay. So I had an alternative to the tag cloud that I've been working on as well. So again, this is just a jQuery thing here. See this? It's kind of hard to see. So let's put something else in the mix. Let's put down a 34 hibernate. Okay, hit send. Oh, I gotta refresh these. Let me do that because I stopped the server. Okay. Let's see if we can do this again. Come on. There we go. So hibernate appears on the left-hand side there. If I do a 55 joules, the number represents how big to make that thing. If I do a 3 JBPM, the idea is it's the score. See that tiny little thing there? And the cool thing is, check this guy out. Fully animated. This is an HTML5 canvas. I can pause on some. It freezes the canvas. I can click on it and drill down if I wanted to. And the reason I like this concept, as well as the concept you saw in the other demonstrations, is again, if you think about a real-time dashboard, right? My ultimate goal with all this is we had to say on your iPad or your iPhone or Android phone or Android tablet, think of that head nurse sitting in a hospital. They need to know exactly what's going on in real time if at all possible. Did we have a bunch of patients all arrive with the same issue? Are we running out of resources like certain types of equipment or beds, or et cetera, et cetera? You can actually push to their client in real time and keep essentially a dashboard alive all the time. So these concepts that we show here, right, are simplistic, but it does give you an idea for what is interesting out there in the world. So app server, let's say, in the HTML5 context. So this is you taking advantage of that WebSocket trick with a Hornet queue topic. I'm just sending them from the client here, right? Sending the messages out, and then this guy's receiving them in real time. And then, this is not my JavaScript. I went out and Googled, said I want a tag cloud, found one, you know, included it in, and just modified it. So that's goat1000.com. Funny name, I know. I like him too. You can play with him a little bit. So you can, depending on where you bring your mouse, it spins, get it rolling. But that's all JavaScript logic, just like you saw our animated balls inside the demonstration earlier. Okay? So let's bring this to a close. These are the resources I'd recommend to you. HTML5rocks.com if you want to learn more. There's a fantastic interactive presentation. You can run it on your iPad or you can run it in your desktop browser. You can interact with it, play with it, and try these HTML5 things for yourselves. Modernizer is, if you take one tip away from this, Modernizer is your friend. I really like Modernizer. Dive into HTML5.org. It's an online book. I read several books, and those were one of the ones I checked out. That crazy long URL there has got some way cool demos listed out there. There's also Chrome experiments and then HTML5demos.com. But you just type into Google, I want an example of this or an example of that. You're going to find 85 of them in some cases. Sometimes it's only 2 or 3 of something you're looking for if it's really obscure. But at this point, there's absolutely no reason not to do this. And I'll tell you why. We had a conversation in Jay's session earlier. Well, I might be stuck with IE6. My users are on IE6 or IE7 or something like that. That's your corporate standard. Well, I guarantee that somebody in your organization thinks having an iPhone is cool. I guarantee it, right? Somebody does. And it's for probably a VP or higher. And you can always go to that person and say, you know what? We want to take part of that application we built to do HR, expense reporting or whatnot. Well, you know, the sales team, they're never really in the office. They're always on the road. They all got iPhones. Can I port that application to an HTML5 iPhone-based app so they can run it anywhere in the field that they are? Absolutely. All right? And if you have a boss that just is not agreeable, the job market is wonderful right now for us IT folks. Any questions? We have a moment or two left. Any questions?
What was the site that evaluates the client abilities?
Modernizer.
The one that gave you.
Oh, HTML5 test. HTML5test.com. I use that one too. I really like both those. So, yes, sir.
The WebSocket's mobile. How do you mitigate the compatibility?
Yeah, you actually have